Thank you. Thank you, dear host, for inviting me to this important event, and forgive me for not being there. I am concluding another conference I co-organized, which prevented me from traveling, but it does engage with the same themes that you are interrogating here today. So let me connect my remarks by turning to the message Pope Francis issued on Easter Sunday, April 12th last year, in the midst of the raging pandemic. He called for the consideration of a universal basic wage, not income, wage, that would ensure and concretely achieve the ideal of no worker without rights, and which would acknowledge and dignify the noble essential tasks working people carry out. The pandemic has made it abundantly clear: care is work, and work is care. Millions of workers toil away in poorly paid and difficult conditions, and millions more are left without any employment opportunity whatsoever. And thus, the aim of guaranteeing a universal basic wage is the same as guaranteeing the access to decent and dignified employment for all, as recognized by other papal encyclicals and a broad range of international documents, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, national constitutions, treaties, and covenants. Allow me to suggest that we have concrete solutions to tackling the multiple pandemics before us: COVID, poverty, mass unemployment, public health, and the climate crisis. The proposal on which I have been working on for some time is called the Public Job Guarantee, that secures a decent job with a decent wage in a project serving the public good to anyone who is seeking such work. A European job guarantee will be not just a job creation program, but a structural policy that would ensure the sort of resilience that we have been discussing here at this conference. First, it's an institutional framework that provides good jobs where they're needed in critical public service areas. For example, it can ensure just transition for fossil fuel workers as we move to a green economy, and it can ensure the availability of a public health corps that can be deployed whenever it is needed. Second, it guarantees jobs are not the collateral damage of crises, whatever their source: tech change, pandemics, climate disasters. Next, by providing a public option for jobs, we secure genuine full employment and establish a labor standard, the basic minimum wage and benefit package that no working person should go without. Finally, it is a stepping stone to new employment opportunities for the millions of youths who are unemployed across the continent. Now, a European job guarantee would not only serve as a public option for decent jobs, but as a critical job creation tool in long neglected areas. It can help train public health workers, staff community clinics, hospitals, vaccine distribution centers, and the like. It can ensure that there are no longer public health deserts across the continent. And importantly, it can staff countless urgent tasks to remediate and repair the environment. Catastrophic events are uninsurable. There is no actuarial model that we can devise to protect ourselves from the financial costs of calamities like COVID or the climate crisis. Governments must act. But also, essential public services are not profitable in the way to induce enough private investment and provisioning. One cannot hope to structure the precise commercial return to ensure that there are enough hospitals, environmental projects, community cleanup, environmental rehabilitation investments. Governments must act. But amidst the multiple pandemics, there is another epidemic, the quiet, perennial epidemic of unemployment and poorly paid employment, All research available demonstrates that unemployment inflicts unconscionable health costs on individuals, their spouses, their children. In my own work, I demonstrate that unemployment behaves like an epidemic, from the way it spreads from community to community. It is also highly correlated to suicides, increases mortality of the unemployed, large physical and mental toll on the family members. Children growth stunting and poor educational outcomes are also correlated. How can one hope to solve the public health crisis without solving the unemployment crisis? Unemployment is not just an economic problem, it is a powerful social determinant of public health. A European job guarantee is a method of inoculation. It can tackle both crises together by creating employment opportunities for the unemployed. It would prevent the outsized health costs, while simultaneously it can mobilize our collective capacities to tackle the gaps of the public health and environmental needs that we have. As it is surely the case in Europe, in the United States, for example, COVID revealed acute shortages. First, we didn't have enough dispatchers to answer the calls of the ill. Then there were not enough sanitation workers to ensure clean spaces. As children moved to remote learning environment, there were not enough teachers and teacher assistants to help in the learning process. Our teachers had to teach our children and their own while doing the invisible housework. There were not enough people to deliver food to the elderly who were isolated. There was no shortage of work to be done. And the very people who sustained us and were lauded as essential workers toiled under terrible conditions and with poverty wages. Meanwhile, fires, floods, hurricanes ravaged the country. There was no shortage of work to be done. With the job guarantee in place, we could have the preparedness response to address these concerns. Now, governments around the world did mobilize. However well or however poorly, they did respond, and they used the power of the public purse, public money, not private donations, not tax collections, to fund the COVID response. In the US, overnight, we appropriated a budget of 10% of GDP and eventually passed more than 10% more. But that initial budget was sufficient to cover every single wage in the economy in the critical first 3 months of the pandemic, with money to spare, enough to employ every unemployed person in the country at a living wage. Well, we spent the money, but we still emerged out of the crisis with poorly paid jobs and with mass unemployment. Other countries responded too. Europe broke its own rules. While everything about its institutional design was aimed at tying the hands of governments from spending, quote unquote, excessively, 2008 and COVID made it clear, Europe is not made for crisis, and more crises are in store. Now, the job guarantee is a very concrete, well-developed and tested proposal that can make the difference in how we tackle the challenges before us. There is a framework for implementation. The Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, Article 148 and 122 in particular, provide the legal basis for implementation. And the existing European Youth Job Guarantee provides a blueprint. But there are many, many others. There are countless examples of how we can make this happen. Let's start with the zero long-term unemployment areas in France, to the experiments in Marienthal region in Austria, to the largest job guarantee program in the world, India's National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, to another program that is close to my work and my heart, Plan Jefes y Jefas in Argentina, which I studied for my dissertation, and where I understand that His Holiness Pope Francis worked with the cartoneros, the urban recyclers who cleaned up the landfills and who did essential environmental work and came from the poorest communities. Now, there are countless examples of democratically organized, bottom-up, direct employment programs for the unemployed that deliver real material, community, health, and environmental benefits to the unemployed themselves, to the overall community, to the economy as a whole. The job guarantee is extremely popular. We have polled it in the last few years, and in the US and in France and in the UK, there is a sustained support of upwards of 70%. And few other programs can boast this kind of bipartisan support. Now, in the US, there are mining communities who are recognizing its potential as they transition out of fossil jobs, and they're organizing around it. We have in the US Congress—
I beg your pardon, Pavlina. Time is short. I must invite you to come to the conclusion.
Thank you. I do have a minute only. I just want to say that actually there's legislation around the world, and if you survey from Australian Parliament, who adopted a motion, to Scotland, the largest party, who embraced it, it is the world is taking notice. What I'd like to conclude with is the following. And I'll connect some of the themes from yesterday's sessions. We first are living in an age of multiple pandemics: COVID, inequality, post-truth, rise of authoritarianism, and environmental calamity. The structural factor that underpins all is economic insecurity, and that includes unemployment, poverty, precarious employment. Number two, we understand that the architecture of the European Union needs work. At this moment, it is internally incoherent, and even if there is a consensus on policy, the policies might be unworkable. However, what gives me hope is the recognition, certainly around this table, that treaties and the Constitution are of our own making. Despite the challenges to amend them, they're not immutable, they're not given from above, they're man-made and can be remade. The costs, real and financial, of these pandemics are unavoidable. They are part of our budgets, and if we fail to act, they will be extraordinary. If, however, we choose to act boldly, we can protect human life and the planet. That may mean revising the treaty. That may mean deploying the tools that we have now available, that we used to respond to the pandemic, or it may mean breaching the treaty unwittingly again. And it is a trade-off worth making. We have a job guarantee blueprint, and we have a responsibility. I think that European job guarantee can be this direct and immediate solution to help tackle the multiple crises before us. And I thank you very much for your attention, and I welcome your questions.